Hello guys, Joe Bonamassa here, Nürnberg, Germany, for the has to be the 10th rig rundown we've done, but we haven't done this setup yet, so I don't even know I could say rig rundown in here, but let the trademark people figure that out. Basically my setup is pretty basic now. It really isn't much, there isn't much to it, to be honest with you. If you want to start at the pedals are new for 2018 is the Blue Hippo, which is a chorus pedal. Now, the settings are not secret, they're just the same, and so you tape over the knob so that the settings don't change. And basically what I'm using it for is a couple of the solos. When Reese takes a solo or somebody, I comp some like organ chords behind it, and it does a nice kind of Leslie-ish effect. And it's non-obtrusive and doesn't color the sound. That's why I like all the way huge stuff, because you could plug straight into the amp or go through the device, and the amp has the same amount of gain, which is, you know, everything's predicated on the amp now. The now infamous Double Land Special, which is basically two overrated specials in one pedal. Basically just set one higher gain, one for less gain. We have a couple of songs that kind of mimic some of the Gary Moore early 90s type of guitar playing, and you need more gain, so with a Les Paul, and it'll get there. This is the second. I'm on to my second Joe Bonamassa Crybaby. I retired the first. I gave George Trips the first one. I give all my first pedals back to George for his museum. But this is the second Joe Bonamassa wah that we've used, and where I got that, I just went out to the merch stalls and nicked that from our merch guy, and that's it. And they work great. And one of the most freeing things you could do is you get away from being kind of pinned to a pedal board, pinned to pedal board power. You have ground issues. We use all batteries, and these are pretty efficient on batteries. So it's not like we're sitting here, you know, burning whale oil in the buses and having condor egg omelets. I mean, so it's environmentally friendly to a point. This is new for 2018. This slide holder made by our drum tech Dan Simpson, and it looks like an old medicine bottle with a piece of foam on the inside, and you just drop the slide. So this way you can just. And two wedges, basically just has our wonderful background singers, Jade and Juanita, and myself and Paulie, and it's just vocals now. I've tried to cut back on the amount of guitar that's coming back, because, you know, my hearing's going. And everybody thinks it's the third wedge. Why does he need three wedges, you know, two to hear himself and one for his ego? No, that's actually a teleprompter, because as you get older, and if you have 60 songs in your catalog, 70 songs, and you try to pull them out every once in a while, the teleprompter comes in handy, and that's the Bonavision. And it'll also play your favorite football game at any
during the show.
Yeah, you know, you could type anything into the teleprompter. You could type in a recipe for lentil soup or song lyrics. In my case, it's a little bit of both. Let's go back here. The greatest compliment I've ever been paid by any fellow artist who's a rock and roll legend and a Hall of Famer and a superstar. His name is Brian Setzer. And he came and sat in with our band in 3 or 4 years ago in Minneapolis. And he came up to the deck and he was like, "Man, those are some of the nicest horn stands I've ever seen in my entire life." And for the amount of money we paid for these, that was all the validation I needed. The man himself, the king of the orchestra, Brian Setzer, approves of these horn stands. So we're proud of these. This is the secret device that I suggest anybody who relies on gain-based amplifiers, not preamp-based amplifiers. I mean, in the sense of you have to turn the amp up to a certain point for it to distort a certain amount. I guess they all do that, but you know, these high-powered twins are very sensitive. Behind here is what you call a kikasui, and because we're in Europe, or even when we're not in Europe, we're back in the States. Leo Fender designed his amps for 110 at 60 hertz. And when we used to come over here and convert the power, it would be 110, 115, 120 volts at 50 hertz. And there's a difference in the sound. I mean, ask any Hammond organ player plugging in a converted Hammond to 50 hertz, and now he's not in tune with the band. So there's a little bit of difference, and I always wondered why the gain and the blooming of the amplifiers were different here versus in the States, and I figured out why. So I like 120 volts at 60 hertz, and this Kikasui will make power when power doesn't exist. If the line, the line off, because we're tapped into the phase 3 power here. If you're only getting 115 today from the Serena, it's going to make 120, and it's not like those old Furman line conditioners or a power conditioner. They don't make power. That machine makes power. And I saw a similar video on Angus Young, and that's where I nicked the idea, because he likes his Marshalls at 235 volts or whatever, I forget the actual number, at 50 hertz. Because if you think about it, Marshalls were designed at 50 hertz, not 60. So anywhere in the world, you take this device around in this little black box and you have consistent power, which the minute they plugged it in, it sounded way better. Here's the amp rig. It's 4 high power twins. The ones on the outside that are mic'd are the new Joe Bonamassa twins, which came out wonderful, and they sound fantastic. And they have Joe Bonamassa Celestion 85 watt speakers in them. Basically, every amp here is set basically the same. Sometimes they're set so loud that the knobs actually start rattling, like on this one here, the Seagal twin. And this was the one I bought from Steven Seagal, the actor, and that's the one that was modeled to make the signature one. And you know, I've been using these high power twins for as long as I've been on the Tweed amps, and it used to be 2 Bassemans, 2 twins, and now it's just 4 twins. And I like the immediacy of 4 twins. The Bassman's got a little squishy and a little bright. The twins, this is a real jet engine. And the thing I love about twins is they make any guitar brand, maker, you name it, sound optimal for what it's supposed to be. If you're playing a Les Paul or a 335 or a Firebird or a Fender Tele or Esquire or Strat, they optimize what is coming out of the guitar. It's really a guitar friendly, and I think it's the best amp Leo ever made. I mean, people argue about that, but as far as sonics and the ability to shake the ground and leave a mark, these are top of the heap. You could argue about the Bassman and the Deluxe, and he was a real inventor, Leo. The cabling is provided by Klotz, and we've been doing these signature cables for now almost a decade. And the great thing about these, because I use 40-foot main guitar cables on stage, so I can waddle around as freely. And the difference between a 5-foot version of this cable and a 40-foot version, you can plug into the 1 amp, and you don't lose any sound. And it doesn't color the sound, doesn't make it brighter, doesn't make it softer. And these silent plugs, so when I unplug the guitar on stage, it doesn't pop. And you just have to remember the red end is the one that goes into the guitar. The settings are really simple. Like I said, they're pretty much all the same. I'm lazy today, so I can OCD this for you, but it's all the same. Basically, on the amp, depending on the pot, between 9.5 and 10.5 volume-wise. Treble is about between 8 and 9. Bass is between off and 3, depending on the venue. Middle is between 8 and 9, and presence is between 7 and 8 or 8 and 9, depending on the venue. And they're all set the same. So you're like, well, why don't you just use 1 twin and blah blah blah. Well, here's the thing: is there's a symbiotic relationship that happens with when you have that amount of headroom and a guitar. Now I could put, I only listen to, and the audience only listens to this twin right here, and I have this in the wedges, and yeah, I could just crank crank this in the wedges and it would be fine. But you don't have the headroom, and it doesn't move the amount of air. And my favorite guitar sounds are loud guitar sounds that move a lot of air, and that's why I use 4 when you could really get away with 2. And it depends on space. You know, some of the loudest gigs I've ever been involved in, like at the Cavern Club, Mr. Kipps, Borderline, this radio show we did in Germany, where we do these, like, every once in a while we'll do these like small club shows. I think you use 1 twin, and it's deafening, but it's a smaller space. You know, here we're in an arena, so it doesn't seem that loud up here, but you know, it's 129 decibels behind the glass. The way everything splits, because a lot of people ask me, like, how do you split it? It's real simple. You can just see over here, there's 2 Layla P splits. They're passive, and they have phase and ground or earth, whatever you want to call it. The number 3 slot in this particular rig always hums. I don't know, it doesn't matter what amp, but there's an amp right over there, always hums. So there's a hum eliminator, which is not in the greatest condition, but it is, that's what it is. And again, the secret weapon behind the curtain is the TC chorus pedal, which is always on, and it's set very subtly. And that's the final split in all of this. And the idea is, you put a little chorus on the sound. It doesn't get overwhelming, but what it does is it tightens up the bottom end. Because sometimes Fender amps, even with selection speakers, get a little loose on the bottom end, and you do notice it when it's off immediately, but you don't notice it when it's on. It just tightens up the bottom end. And then the Clear Sonic Perspex, which I've been using forever, and it's just something I've gotten used to. You know, it's just, I mean, without it, it would be like, it would make national news. I mean, people would get hurt. I would get hurt. Audience would get hurt. And that's it. And that's how it all works. There isn't any rule book. There's no magic box. There's no secret anything. Everything you can get here from a store. Except for the twins, which you have to order from our website. Not to plug them or anything, but what do you think this is? You know, everything you can buy in a store or vintage guitar show, and you know the thing is, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a lot of sound. You just have to know what sound you're going for. And one of my favorite amps in the world is a hot rod Fender DeVille, 212, 410, single 12. You can rule the world with those amps, you know, a twin reverb, you know, a Marshall head and cabinet, you know, you can rule the world with all this if you know what you're going for in your mind. These are just tools to get to where you're going in your mind. You know, when I used to use the Dumble amps, I was always waiting for this mystique and this magic to happen, and I realized I just would set the Dumbles like I'd set the Fenders, you know, and run the Fenders and the Marshalls. And then I go, why don't I just use the Fenders? You know, save myself a lot of money and a lot of grief. And so that's why I switched to the Fenders. And I find that I can still do the heavy songs, but I can also do all the blues stuff from our catalog. And I'm not having to go back to the pedal board every single song to engage some other device that does something just because you invented this concept in your mind. What it forced me to do was play, and it forced me to play and get the sounds that I hear in my head through the conduit, which is the guitar and your hands. And it really laser focused that in, because there's no reverb, there's no delay, there's no any sort of, the only reverb is in the room, which we're lucky today because it's a nice live room. But there's nights where there's just no help and you have to play through it. And I think it makes you a better player, worst case scenario. So these are the amplifiers. And the Snark is pure comfort. So just in case.